Okay, this story happened.
You're going to listen to the story?
This story happened in a beautiful spot in the country in the middle of the summer. Down by the lake, there's this little pond, and a little mother duck had been sitting on her eggs in the shade, waiting for her. She had been waiting for a long time and sitting on those eggs forever and ever and ever. They were taking a long time to hatch. When suddenly, one day, she started to feel the little wiggles in her. And she popped out her nest, and those little eggs, they were starting to crack. And pretty soon, those little noses were popping out of those little shells. And they were little gold little noses coming out of the shell. And they cracked open and pulled the shell off. All these little ducklings coming out of their shell. Oh, they were so cute.
Was there only one that had a baby?
The mother was so proud. Almost. And then she noticed that one of the eggs hadn't hatched. And she's like, what is that? And just at that moment, this old mother duck came over. I hear your chickens, I hear your ducklings hatched. I hear they're hatched. I come to see. Quack. She had a big old quack, quack. So the old mother duck. She came to look, and those little ducklings were so cute, and she was just kissing them and quacking at them, and she was so proud of them. You have such a beautiful little family. And then she saw that one that was left. Quack. What's that? She said. It hasn't hatched yet. What's the matter with that one? It's huge. When is it going to hatch? And the mother said, I don't know. Never had an egg that big before. Must just need an extra day. Well, that old mother duck, she knew everything. That's gotta be a turkey egg, she said. Quack. That's a turkey egg. It won't hatch, and it won't swim if it does hatch. You should just leave it alone and take your little ducklings down to the pond so they can swim. And the mother duck, she wanted to give it some time. Maybe it's just a really big duckling that needs my love. So she sat and sat and sat. The old mother duck said, quack, whatever you want to do. But I tell you, that's a turkey egg. She went off her way. So the mother sat on that egg a whole nother day, a whole nother day, a whole nother day, just waiting and waiting. And finally, she heard the wiggling. She felt the wiggling. She jumped up, and there it was. And something was a-pecking and a-moving. Pretty soon she saw the little beak pop out.
It wasn't gold.
It wasn't gold, it was black. She was like, ooh, God. And she saw her little duckling popping out of the egg. And it wasn't this cute little yellow duckling. It was this big, funny-looking gray duckling with his hair was all funky. And she looked at it, she said, are you a turkey? Quack, quack. You a turkey? And the duckling didn't know what to say, so it said, honk. She said, what was that? That's not a cute little quack quack like my little duckling. She said, maybe it is a turkey. So she said, we better find out. So she gathered up all her little ducklings and took them down to the pond and shoot them into the pond to see if they could swim. Well, they all did wonderfully. And they were swimming around and swimming, and the little duckling, a big little duckling, that was not yellow, he was swimming just as good as all the rest. So she said, well, I guess he's not a turkey. He's just ugly. Whatever. So she said, let's go to the farm and meet all the other animals. So she took all her little ducklings and had them follow her to the barnyard. And they paraded through the farm to show themselves to all the other animals. What do you think the animals said? They were really excited to see the first little chickens, but when they saw our funny little duckling, they went, oh, what's that? Ooh, he's ugly. Ooh, what did you do to that one? And then they started poking him and hitting him and swatting him, and some days they wouldn't even let him have food. And our poor little duckling, he got really tired of that. He was very sad. So he ran away, ran as far as he could till he got to a pond. And at this pond there were wild ducks. And the wild ducks, they said, hey, you're ugly, but you can stay here. We don't mind. So he stayed the night there, and in the morning he woke up to the sound of boom, a big gunshot, and all the wild geese went flying into the air and taking off to get away from the guns. Our poor little duckling, he couldn't fly yet, so he hid and he shook and he put his nose in his wing, and he just hid there frozen all day long while the gunshots were going over his head. And he was just shaking and shivering. Finally, the nighttime came and it became quiet again. And our poor little ugly duckling snuck out of his little hiding place.
The ugly duckling.
Yeah, that's the one. And he snuck out of his hiding place, and he ran as fast as he could and as long as he could until he came to a little farmhouse. And in the farmhouse, it was starting to get dark, and the door was open just a little bit, so he snuck inside. And inside, he found a little corner and he fell asleep. And in the morning, he woke up, and there was a cat looking at him. Meow. And then there was a hen looking at him. Quack, 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 quack. And they were saying, "What are you doing here? Who are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm a little duckling and I'm lost and I don't have a home." And the cat said, "Can you purr?" The missus likes it when we purr. It makes her happy. And the duckling said, "No, I can't purr." And the hen said, "Can you give eggs? You can give eggs. You're a duck." And the duckling said, "No, I don't think I can give eggs either." But they let him stay on for a couple weeks to try. At the end of the couple weeks, he hadn't given him any eggs. And he said, "What can you do?" And the duck said, "I can swim." And they looked at him. He said, "I can dive. I love to dive in the water." And the cat said, "Look, if you can't give eggs and you can't purr, you're not worth anything. You just need to get out." So the ugly duckling had to take off again. He ran and he ran and he ran until he finally came to a lake all by himself. There was a little pond where he could just stay all by himself. And the water was getting colder because the winter was coming. And he was
He
alone.
got frozen. Duck,
Not yet. But first,
let's migrate.
yes, in fact, he looked up in the sky one day and he saw this beautiful flock of swans flying across the sky. And their wings were gorgeous. And they were just sailing through the air, and their necks were just long and graceful. And he looked up at those.
Scavengers.
He looked up at those swans. I don't know, but they were beautiful. And he just wished he could be like that swan. It's like, and he let out this gorgeous honk. Oops. That was a horrible sound. He hated his sound. It was such an awful sound, and he just shriveled up. He felt so bad. He said, "Not only will I never be beautiful or great or wonderful, I can't even make good noises."
He turns into a swan.
He didn't know that yet. He didn't know that. He was just so sad. And so he went back to his little pond and kept swimming in his little pond. But it got colder and colder and colder until the water in the pond started to freeze. And it froze around him. And every night it would get closer and closer to him. And in the day he would swim around and around and around to keep it from freezing. But at night it would freeze in a little bit more, until one night when he was asleep, the water froze right up next to him and froze him solid in the ice. And he woke up and he couldn't move. And that, just later on that morning, a farmer came by and saw him stuck in the ice. And he went over and he pounded the ice until it broke and carried the poor little duckling home to his house. And he thought, "Oh, finally, I'll be able to stay in a nice warm place for the rest of the winter." But it wasn't going to work, because when he got to the house, the children were so excited, they started to chase him and play with him, and he got so scared. He flew over here and he flew over here, and he knocked this over and he broke that, and the kids were running over here and diving on him and climbing over the table and the chairs, and the mom was screaming and the kids were screaming and the mom was chasing him with the broom, and the kids were trying to catch him, and he snuck out of the house as fast as he could and ran and ran and ran until he couldn't run anymore. And he found a small place under a little bush where he could kind of stay warm and find bugs for the rest of the winter. And the winter was long, and it was hard, and it was cold. And sometimes he had bugs to eat, and sometimes he didn't have anything to eat. So many hard things for this poor little swan. He didn't know he was a swan. For this poor little duckling. But one day, he made it through the winter, and one morning he woke up to the sun warm on his back. And he stretched out his wings, and they felt so big, and they felt so strong. And he pulled them up and down, and he floated into the air. And he could see down for miles, and he flew, and he sailed all around the country. And then he looked down, and there was this gorgeous little park down there with a little pond, and there were flowers and trees and bushes, and it looked so beautiful. And he said, that's where I want to live. And he sailed down next to the pond, and there were 3 beautiful swans on the pond. And he said, oh, if I could just swim on a nice little corner of that pond and just keep to myself and hide behind the grass, maybe they would let me swim there. And maybe they wouldn't see me, and maybe they wouldn't bother me, and maybe if I could just swim in a corner of this beautiful place, I would be content. And so he snuck down and got in the water and slipped behind the grass, but the swans had seen him. And they rushed over to him, and he was like, oh no, they've seen me. Oh, they're going to scare me away, they're going to push me away, they're going to bite me. And he closed his eyes and he put his head in the water to hide. And they came over to him, and they didn't bite him, and they didn't yell at him, and they didn't call him ugly. Instead, they said, hello, welcome to our pond. You want to be our friend? And he lifted up his head. Just right here. He lifted up his head out of the water, and when he looked at his reflection in the water, he didn't see an ugly duckling anymore, did he? What did he see?
He saw a beautiful swan.
He saw a beautiful swan. He was so overwhelmed. He hadn't been a duckling at all, had he? When he was born, he was born a
baby swan.
He was a baby swan, just like you guys, huh? You're not swans. You're princes and princesses. Ah, you're going to become great and wonderful, just like this beautiful swan did. So don't let anybody ever tell you that you're not good enough for anything.
That's just make-believe.
Yes, it is a make-believe story, but it's a true story, huh? Because you can't have a swan come out of a duck egg, can you? And you can't have a duck come out of a swan egg, can you? No. And you guys are all princesses and princes. Anyways, thanks for listening to my story.